For letter K, I want to look at the idea of a king, because that's something that is all throughout Scripture, but it's something that Americans have a hard time understanding because we don't have a king. Um, Honestly, I think we have America because we said no to having a king. And so it's a thing that didn't need to be explained to the original audience. The Bible is written in a world that people had no concept of there not being a king. Like, that's just, there's always a king. Every nation has a king. They didn't even really have the term nation, they were kingdoms, which just means the king's dominion. And so, something in modern American mindset, maybe it's for as long as there's been America, I don't know, but I can speak to modern America, that if we have any concept at all of a king, we think it's a bad thing. Because, boy, it just can't possibly be that there should be someone who's in power that, you didn't even vote for him, for crying out loud. And maybe it's just because they were born in the right family, or they won some military conquest and conquered you, but they're king. And whether you like it or not, they're just there. And they get to make rules, and you just have to go along with it. And that sounds horrible. Like, even the way I'm describing it, it sounds very negative. But this is how the world was for thousands of years. And this is how the Bible is written. And it describes that God intended to be the king of Israel before they ever had a human king. And in that same kind of sense, Jesus is meant to be our king. And it's hard for us to really comprehend what it's telling us, since we don't understand what it is to have a king. And it really boils down to this idea of, as much as you might not like the terminology with it, but it's just, his word is law. What he says goes, and he gets to make the decisions, and you are a subject. You are not the king. And that's really Christianity at its base level. It's, are you going to try to be your own king of your own life, or will you submit to Christ being king? Because when you try to do it yourself, that's what you have. You have yourself. But the idea of Christ being your king, what he says goes. Because he said yes, or because he said no, and that's enough, simply because he said so. And we can go through and struggle and wrestle with how well or how quickly we obey these things, but we never get to change the rules. We don't get to say, okay, you can be kind of king, but not really. Like, he's your king or he's not. And anything less than obedience is rebellion. And it's just this hard thing for us to really swallow and accept. But Christ is the king. And sooner or later, he will be seen as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Like, the Bible tells us that everyone in all of history will see and recognize and acknowledge his authority. And so it's a question of, will you acknowledge it now and submit to it now? Because he's your king. That's all I got.